Our oceans today are filled with terrifying apex predators, the great white, orcas, sperm whales, colossal squid. That is the most frightening ocean you can picture. And it's a sweet dream. Because 10 million years ago, off what is now Peru, those same 4 jobs already existed, and every one of them was held by something worse. A shark the length of 2 orcas, a whale with teeth over a foot long, Otodus Megalodon, and Livyatan melvillei. And the counter doesn't stop there. 35 million years, a whale shaped like a sea snake, longer than a bus, with a bite that crushed the skulls of other whales. Basilosaurus, 470 million years, and something down there is still hunting. A cone-shelled thing in an ocean with no jaws in it yet, Cameroceras. So, how did a whale rule the ocean with a brain that couldn't echolocate at all? A sperm whale barely uses its teeth, so what was Leviathan's mouth for? And one of these 4 isn't even sitting on its own throne. And the biggest shark that ever lived is gone, while the great white is still out there, right now, in water people swim in. Why? 4 seats, 4 demotions. I'm Axel, this is Drowned Earth. Here's the thing about the top of the ocean. It isn't a list of animals, it's a set of jobs. Something has to be the big coastal ambush hunter. Something has to be the pack hunter that works in families. Something has to go down into the dark and hunt where there's no light at all. And something soft and fast has to live out in the open water where there is nowhere to hide. 4 jobs, the ocean has always filled them. It just hasn't always filled them with these. The animals sitting in those seats right now are the ones you're afraid of. They are also, every one of them, the smallest thing that has ever done the job. Not the strongest, not the best armed, the smallest. Because sitting on top was never about size. It means nothing eats you, and it makes you the most expensive animal in the ocean to keep alive. Which is why, when the food changes, the top falls first. All 4 of these seats have changed hands, and every animal that lost one was worse than the animal that took it. Starting with the one that lost its seat to something smarter. An orca is about 30 feet long and weighs as much as 4 cars. That is not what makes it frightening. It hunts in families, it teaches, and off South Africa, 2 of them worked out how to open a great white shark, take the liver, and leave the rest. Until an entire population of the ocean's most famous predator abandoned that coast. That's the seat, intelligence. Now go back 35 million years and take it away. In the late Eocene, the animal at the top of that seat was called Basilosaurus. The name means king lizard, which is wrong. It was a whale. They named it before they knew. It was between 50 and 65 feet long, longer than the orca, longer than a city bus. But it wasn't shaped like a whale you'd recognize. It was long and thin, and it moved like something you'd back away from. An eel the length of a bowling lane. And it didn't swim like a whale either. Its spine was built out of vertebrae so stretched and hollow that the body couldn't hold a rigid line. So instead of the deep, powerful up and down beat a modern whale uses, this thing rippled, side to side along the surface like something enormous being dragged through the water by its own tail. It almost certainly couldn't dive. Whatever it wanted, it had to take at the top. And here's the part that should bother you. Its brain was tiny. There's no evidence it could echolocate. That ability, the sonar every dolphin and every orca uses to see in the dark, hadn't evolved yet. It almost certainly didn't hunt in families. It was, as far as we can tell, a very large animal that was not very clever and was on its own. So what did it eat? We know the answer, and we know it in the least comfortable way possible. In Egypt, there's a place called Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales. It's desert now. It was seabed then. Hundreds of these animals are lying in the sand, and inside some of them, where the stomach used to be, there are bones that don't belong to them. Skulls of a smaller whale called Dorodon, juveniles. The skulls are crushed. It was eating other whales young, and it was doing it by biting through their heads. No sonar, no pack, no plan. Just a body long enough to catch anything, and a jaw strong enough to end the argument. There's one more thing in that sand, and it's the strangest detail in this whole video. Basilosaurus had legs. Not flippers, legs. Back legs. hanging off the end of a 60-foot sea monster. A thigh bone, a knee that bent, an ankle, and toes. The whole assembly is about as long as your forearm, on an animal longer than a bus. They were useless, they couldn't hold any weight, and they couldn't push it through water. The best guess is that they helped two of these things hold on to each other while mating, which is a sentence I did not expect to write today. So why were they there at all? Because whales used to walk. 10 million years earlier, the ancestors of this thing were wolf-sized animals hunting on riverbanks in what is now Pakistan. Then they got longer and lower and better in the water until Basilosaurus, where the animal has committed. It can never come out again, and it still has the feet, it just doesn't use them. That is what was sitting in the ocean's pack hunter seat, a land animal that had been in the water for 10 million years, hadn't finished putting its legs away, and was eating other whales' children by biting through their skulls. The orca replaced that with a brain, which is an upgrade for the orca and a downgrade for everything that has to be in the water with one. The second seat is the one nobody watches because it happens where you can't see. A sperm whale is the largest predator with teeth alive on Earth. 60 feet, 50 tons. It routinely dives half a mile down. It has been recorded past a mile. It stays down for over an hour in total blackness at a pressure that would collapse your lungs into something the size of a fist. And it finds its food by shouting. A sperm whale's click is the loudest sound any animal makes. Louder than a rocket launch at close range. It fires that click into the dark, listens for what comes back, and builds a picture of a squid it will never actually see. Now look at its mouth, because this is the part that matters. Its teeth are only in the bottom jaw. The top jaw has sockets they fit into, and not much else. It doesn't chew, it doesn't tear. It opens and the squid goes in whole. The largest toothed predator on the planet essentially vacuums. One more thing about that head, because the head is most of the animal. A sperm whale's forehead is a third of its body length, and it is essentially a tank. Inside it are hundreds of gallons of a pale, waxy oil called spermaceti. The click is made right at the front, in a set of lips buried in the face. It travels backwards through that tank, bounces off the front of the skull like a mirror, and fires out forwards as a beam. The head isn't a head, it's a lens. 10 million years ago, that seat belonged to something that did not vacuum. In 2008, in the Pisco Desert in Peru, a team found a skull. Not a whole animal, a skull and some teeth. The skull was 10 feet long. The teeth were 14 inches. 14 inches, longer than your forearm. And unlike the sperm whale, they were in both jaws, and they met. They named it Livyatan melvillei, Leviathan for the obvious reason, and Melville for the man who wrote Moby Dick. And that name is doing more work than it looks like. In 1820, a whale ship called the Essex was working the Pacific when a large sperm whale turned, lined itself up, and rammed the hull. Then it backed off, turned around, and did it again. The ship went down. The crew spent 3 months in open boats and did things to stay alive that none of them talked about afterwards. A young writer heard that story, and 30 years later he built a novel on it. The whale that sank the Essex is the small one. It was about the same length as a sperm whale, same seat, same size class, completely different animal, because a sperm whale is built to swallow. Livyatan was built to bite. Those are the largest biting teeth we have ever found on any animal. And an animal doesn't grow 14-inch teeth to eat squid. It grows them to take pieces out of something that is also very large. And teeth that meet do something teeth that don't can't. A sperm whale's lower teeth slot into an empty upper jaw, so the mouth closes like a trap and holds. Leviatan's closed like a pair of shears, uppers and lowers passing each other. 14 inches of enamel on both sides, with a skull 10 feet long behind them driving the whole thing shut. That is not a mouth for catching. That's a mouth for removing a piece of something and letting the rest bleed. The best guess, from the teeth and from what else is lying in that same rock, is that it hunted baleen whales. Medium ones, the size of the humpbacks people pay to go and look at. And in that same layer of Peruvian desert, in the same water, at the same time, there are Megalodon teeth. Hold on to that, we'll come back to it. The third seat is the strangest, because the animal in it right now is one we had almost never seen. It's the heaviest invertebrate on Earth. 0.5 ton. Its eyes are the size of dinner plates, the largest eyes of any animal that has ever lived. Its tentacles carry hooks that swivel, and for 100 years we only ever saw dead ones. Washed up, hauled up in nets. One adult pulled off a long line in the Ross Sea in 2007, still the biggest anybody has ever had their hands on. Then in March of last year, for the first time, a camera saw one alive where it lives. It was 4 inches long, a baby. Glass clear, drifting near the South Sandwich Islands, a mile down. 100 years of looking. That is our first proper look. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. Where do you think we found it in 1925? In a sperm whale's stomach, 2 arms of one. Open a sperm whale and it is full of beaks. Thousands of them, the one part of a squid a whale can't digest. And a lot of them are colossal squid. So the animal in seat 3 isn't the top of anything. It's enormous, it's armed, it lives somewhere almost nothing can follow, and it's food. That's what makes this seat different. The other 3 lost size. This one lost rank. Because 470 million years ago, the soft animal in the open water was not being eaten by anything. Its name was Cameroceras. It was a nautiloid, the same broad family as the little chambered nautilus you've seen in a photograph. Except its shell wasn't coiled. It was a straight cone, held out in front like a spear, and the animal lived in the wide end with its tentacles out. It moved by jetting water. It hung in the water column, in an ocean where the biggest fish were a few inches long, and nothing had a proper jaw yet. And I want you to picture the world it did that in, because there has never been anything like it since. The land above was bare. No trees, no grass, no soil worth the name. Bare rock and shallow crusts of green at the water's edge, and nothing walking on any of it. Everything alive was in the sea, and the sea was crowded. Reefs built by animals that no longer exist, trilobites in their thousands across the floor. Forests of stalked creatures filtering the water like flowers on stems. Almost all of it armored, almost all of it slow. Into that, drop a straight cone with muscle in the wide end. It hangs motionless in the dark water. It jets, one hard pulse, no warning, and a ring of tentacles closes on something with a shell, and a beak in the middle of them opens it. Nothing in that entire ocean could do anything about it. I'll be honest with you about the size, because a lot of places won't be. The old numbers you'll see, 30 feet, that sort of thing, come from fragments and a lot of optimism, and they've been coming down for years. It was big. It probably wasn't that big. But size isn't the point here, and this is the one seat where it never was. Cameroceras was the apex of its entire ocean. Not a specialist, not a survivor hiding in the dark. The top. Its replacement is 1/2 ton of muscle with the biggest eyes on Earth that gets swallowed whole by something from seat 2. That's the demotion. Same job, same water, from the top of the world to somebody's dinner. So what took Cameroceras down? Jaws. For the first stretch of the Ordovician, there was essentially nothing in the sea that could bite. Fish existed, they were small, and they had no jaws. They were mouths that sucked. A large shelled animal with tentacles and a jet was, in that world, unbeatable. Then jaws arrived. And a jaw changes the maths for everything wearing a shell, because a shell is a wall, and a wall only works until something can break it. Worse, a shell is heavy, and a cone that size is not a maneuverable object. Cameroceras' entire design assumed that nothing would ever chase it. The glaciation at the end of the Ordovician finished the argument. The sea dropped, the shallow shelves it hunted over drained, and the straight-shelled hunters started their long way out. Its descendants dropped the shell entirely. That's what a squid is, a nautiloid that traded its armor for speed, and then spent the next 400 million years being eaten by whatever grew jaws next. Which leaves the sea everybody actually came here for. A great white shark is up to 20 feet long, carries about 300 teeth in rows that replace themselves, and can leave the water entirely with a seal in its mouth. It is, without much argument, the most famous predator on this planet. And the most underrated thing about it is that it's warm. Not warm-blooded the way you are, it's warm in patches. Where the swimming muscles sit, the arteries and veins run side by side in a dense braid. So blood heading out to the gills to be cooled passes right against blood coming back in and hands its heat over before it can be lost. The shark keeps its own engine heat instead of dumping it into the sea. It does the same for its stomach, and for its eyes and its brain. The result is a fish that can hunt in cold water, digest a seal fast, and think clearly in the dark. And here's the bill. Warm is expensive. Every degree you hold above the water around you has to be paid for in food. Every day, forever. In 2023, a team read isotopes locked into Megalodon's tooth enamel and worked out it was doing the same thing, running about 7 degrees Celsius hotter than the ocean it swam in. A 60-foot animal, with that bill, arriving every single day. Remember that. And it is a replacement. Now, I need to correct something first, because almost everyone gets this backwards. The great white is not descended from Megalodon. It isn't a shrunken Megalodon. They're not even in the same family. The great white's line runs back through the makos, fast, warm, open ocean sharks. Megalodon belongs to a different branch entirely. They weren't parent and child, they were rivals. And they were in the water at the same time. Otodus Megalodon was somewhere between 50 and 60 feet. 2 orcas, nose to tail. Its teeth are the size of a human hand, and they're the reason we know anything about it at all. Sharks are cartilage, so mostly what survives is the teeth. Pick one up, and the thing that gets you isn't the length, it's the edge. Every one of them is serrated the whole way around, like a steak knife the size of your palm, and there were about 250 of them in that mouth, in rows, replacing themselves to the animal's entire life. And we know exactly what it used them on, because the evidence isn't the teeth, it's the bones. Whale vertebrae from that period come out of the rock with gouges cut into them. Rib fragments with the serration marks still legible. Flipper bones, which tells you it went for the limbs first, to stop the thing swimming, the way a big cat goes for a leg. And some of those bones show healing, which means the whale got away, which means we are looking at the ones that survived it. The bite estimates are the largest ever calculated for any animal, and we don't have to guess what it used them on because whale bones from that period turn up with Megalodon tooth marks cut into them. I should tell you how we even know how big it was because it explains why the number keeps moving. Sharks are cartilage. Cartilage does not fossilize well. There is no Megalodon skeleton in a museum anywhere on Earth. There is no complete Megalodon anything. What there is teeth in enormous numbers and a very small handful of partial spines. So the size comes out of a formula. Measure the tooth, compare it to the same tooth in a great white. Scale the rest of the animal to match, which works right up until you ask whether Megalodon was actually shaped like a great white. In the last couple of years, several teams have argued that it wasn't, that it was longer and slimmer, more like a mako stretched out, which changes the weight enormously even if the length holds. So when you see a number for this animal, it isn't a measurement, it's an argument, and it's still going. Remember that Peruvian desert? Livyatan's skull and Megalodon's teeth in the same rock. 10 million years ago, off that coast, a 60-foot shark and a 60-foot whale with 14-inch teeth were hunting the same animals in the same water. That's the ocean. 10 million years is nothing. That's the ocean a blink ago. So what happened to it? Not one thing, several all at once, and all of them boring compared to the animal. The world cooled, sea levels dropped, and Megalodon's young needed warm, shallow water. We've found the nurseries, whole sites full of small teeth, and those shallows drained away. Its food moved too. The whales it hunted got bigger and went to colder water it couldn't follow its babies into. And in the middle of all that, there were these fast, warm, mid-sized sharks moving into the same hunting grounds, eating the same things, growing up in the same shallows. About 3.5 million years ago, Megalodon stopped. The great white did not. So it never inherited the crown. It was standing there when the crown was dropped, and it was one of the reasons it got dropped. 4 seats, a whale that hunted with its family, replacing one that hunted with nothing but length and a crushing bite. A whale that swallows, replacing one that bit. An animal that gets eaten, replacing one that nothing ate. And a shark we've made films about, standing in a spot that used to hold something 3 times its size. Every animal you are afraid of down there is the smallest thing that has ever done its job. The ocean has changed who sits at the top at least 4 times. Every one of those changes took millions of years, and every one of them happened without anybody watching. Every one of those handovers took longer than our entire species has existed. Not one animal alive through any of them had the faintest idea it was happening. The ocean didn't announce it. It just quietly stopped feeding one thing and started feeding another. And remember what the top costs. It's the most expensive seat in the water. The bill is paid in food, and food is the first thing that changes. And there is no rule that says it's finished. Thanks for watching. There's a lot more down here. See you next time on Drowned Earth.